Hello, Michael Dermer.
Hi, hi.
How are you?
I'm doing great. How are you?
Good, good. Happy Friday.
You too.
Um, so, folks, for today's topic is all about dealing with difficult customers, and I know many of us are kind of different stages of our entrepreneurial journey, and so it's a very important topic because as entrepreneurs we're always selling even though we may not think of it, right? But it's about getting clients, it's about prospecting clients, and then when we finally get them, right, how do we kind of make the best relationship possible? So that's what we're going to talk about today. And as we start off, I'd like to invite Michael to join us and share a story from his, experience building a company back in the day. And Michael, you've obviously had thousands and thousands of client interactions. Some were great, some were not so great. So if you could share anything with us that comes to mind, that would be great. And then we'll kick it off.
Sure, it would be my pleasure. Hi, everybody. Happy Friday. Thanks for taking time out of your busy days to join us. Yeah, what it really takes me back to, V, is as you guys all know, in starting that company to reward people for being healthy, it was a very new concept. And I know all of us at times always feel like we're doing something new and different, right? That's why we're entrepreneurs. And certainly we felt that way at the time. And, customers are never really so much difficult, right? You always have to have the perspective that if a customer is frustrated, not happy, not buying, it's always because we're not doing enough, right? But there are those circumstances that really make you scratch your head. I'll never forget, and this gentleman wasn't even a customer yet, when we were offering rewards to healthcare companies and other companies. Waste Management, which for those of you in the United States is one of the largest companies in the US that does waste all over the country, had some of the most unhealthiest employees you imagine. Take your prototypical garbage truck driver, right? That is driving around in a truck collecting garbage and probably eating cheeseburgers and maybe back then even smoking a cigarette, right? Like the most unhealthy people on the planet. And I remember speaking to this gentleman who ran benefits for Waste Management, multi-billion-dollar spend, 50,000 employees, whatever it is. And he said to me, stared me in the face at a trade show and said, after we had coffee, he said, "I will never, ever pay my drivers to be healthy, to do the things they should be doing." And I was like, okay, always talking about, having a vision and communicating it. And people will say, good idea, like whatever. He stared me in the face and said, "We'll never do this." And about 3 months later, I got an email from him and said, "Could you give me a call?" And he goes, "I want to revise my statement." He goes, "The fact that I have to pay my drivers to be healthy is offensive to me, but they keep crashing trucks into buildings because they have sleep apnea. So what do we have to do?" Okay. And so what you realize, and is what is really some of the theme for what we're going to talk about over the course of this hour is customers are never really difficult, right? It is just a function of the fact that we as entrepreneurs have not communicated the value, delivered the value, been proactive about the value, all of which stuff we're going to talk about today. So the customer goes, yeah, right? And what I just described is easier said than done, right? But the one thing I can also tell you is that some of my strongest relationships over the course of my whole professional career have come through conflict with customers. The 10 people I would call today, right now, as the closest clients I've had over the course of many years are the people that we went through something together.
Why do you
Right?
think that is?
For those of you that have ever lifted weights, if you've ever seen the model of what happens to a muscle when you lift your weights, you lift weights and the muscle actually tears, right? And re-engages again stronger. What happens is in the middle of that conflict, right, you see people's values right? You watch people get into it and see what they'll do to you, for you.
Right.
I used to have an old client that would call me, and I would say, you know what? She would work for Cigna, and we became great friends. And I said, and no, she's calling the CEO now. Normally she's calling account management people and other people that run her account. And I said to her one time, I was like, before you get started, could you just call me to say hi one time? Because every time you call me, the shit's hitting the fan, and it's all. I was just one time, just call me and say how you doing. So I think what you find, V, is that when you go through those circumstances, the muscle frays and it re-engages stronger, and you build real trust with people. You don't build trust just by everything going well.
Right.
Okay.
Very true. Good point.
We want to hear about your customer circumstances, the thing that you're struggling with, but I want to start off with a couple of themes to think about. Okay. And remember, customers are different. There's some people sell to consumers, some people sell to businesses, sell to governments, whatever it may be.
Yeah, Michael, I just want to reiterate to everybody on the call, we really want this to be an interactive discussion. So, no question is a stupid question. And even if it's a little bit off topic, please, raise it. You can drop it in the chat here. You can write to me privately, and I'll do it anonymously if that's easier for you. But we just want to be able to answer your specific questions and then get into things that help you.
Terrific. Thank you, V. So here's one of the things that I would tell you, in the Lonely Entrepreneur book, and in the learning community itself, we have this thing called the 7 deadly sins. And these are deadly sins that early stage in your company, when you do these things, they really can set your company back significantly. And one of them is saying customers don't get it, right? Once you yourself as the leader, or you encourage your teams, or at least enable your teams to say customers don't get it, you're already down a terrible path. What you have to say to yourself is, what are the steps that we have to take so that customers get it, so they purchase it, and when they purchase it, they're getting great value out of it. You always have to challenge yourself to say, what is it that we have to do? If a customer is not getting it, a bunch of things I'm going to talk about over the course of an hour. Are you communicating clearly enough? Are you communicating regularly enough? Okay. And the like. So if you walk away with nothing else, don't ever allow yourself or your teams to default to, well, the customer just doesn't understand. Right now, I'd be lying to you if I told you that always is the perspective. I remember, I'll never forget it. We were selling to health plans, and we were having a tough time in the early stage of our company. We were trying to get health plans to do something they had never done before. And I said to a woman one time at a health plan, large health plan, I said, all due respect, you control 1 out of every $6 in the United States, and it's been screwed up for 100 years. Why would you keep doing the same thing? Now, that doesn't always engender the best customer relationships, and so you really can't have the perspective that the customer doesn't get it. You've got to say to you and your teams, what is it that I have to do to make sure customers understand it and get it? Okay, so let's get into that a little bit. One thing I would say is, and this applies to both a prospect who isn't a customer yet, as well as to somebody who is a customer, is what we say at Lonely Entrepreneur, we call more than they ask before they ask. Okay. You want to deliver them value more than what they're asking you for, right? And you want to be able to deliver it before they ask you for it. Okay. So think about that. Think about that in the context of our busy entrepreneurial lives, right? You have to really say to yourself, they asked me for one thing, but I'm going to give them 5 things, right? I'll give you an example. When I started as a corporate lawyer, many of you guys know I started for a big New York law firm in New York. The minute you start working there, the recruiters start calling you because they know many New York corporate lawyers work very hard and they get frustrated working so hard and they want to leave. And they'll call you 5 minutes after you get there and they'll say, hey, listen, I'm a recruiter and I just want you to know that we've got great jobs everywhere. So if you ever get frustrated, call us. And 9 out of 10 would say that same thing. And you would say, well, wait a minute, I just started my job. I'm not looking to leave yet. 1 out of the 10 would say, I'm not interested in what you want to do in a day or a week or even a year. I want to know what you want to do in 10 years. And you'd go, okay. And then 3 months later, remember, more than I asked before I asked, they would come back and say, hey, listen, there's this sector that's developing that really you should keep an eye on and take a look at, right? And so that person was delivering more than they asked them for before they asked them for it. And by doing that, they occupied a different place in my head. Okay, so any one of us can react to a customer saying, I need this, I need this, I need this, right? It is the ones that proactively, right, bring them not only before they ask for it, right, but more than they ask. Okay, so for example, if you're an accounting firm, right, and you serve a corporate client, right, no client would expect you to send them something about their competition, right? But imagine the accounting firm that says, hey, listen, I saw this article about your competition and a trend in your industry. I thought you might be interested in it. Okay. Nowhere in your contract does it say you're supposed to do that, right? But the point is you bring them more than they ask before they ask, okay? And remember, when you think about what you bring them more and before, it's not just stuff exactly relevant to exactly what's going on, right? In the services that you're providing to them, right? It's oftentimes, or put differently, use my accounting firm. Most accounting firms will bring them accounting information, but imagine if you just bring them information relevant to their business or relevant to the person that you work with at the company to make their job easier, even if it isn't related to accounting, right? Because when you do more and before, right, that person walks away going, wow, this person is really trying to help me. This company is really trying to help me, right? Think about, this is the way I always think about this. Think about when you're on the other side. What are the folks that you want to work with and that you want to renew contracts with and you are okay paying more money to, right? It's the ones that bring you more than you ask, right? And before you ask. Think about how many times you go to somebody and you say, hey, can I have this? And in the back of your head going, why didn't they already send this to me? Why did I have to ask for this? Right? So let's take it to the extreme. Let's say more than they ask before they ask. Okay? And when you think about it, think about the things that you're bringing, don't have them just be relevant to exactly what you work on. Right? Give them more. Give them something that adds value to that person's day, add values to that person's work life, or adds value to that business and what that business ultimately is trying to achieve.
Okay. Michael, so actually a question somewhere along these lines. How do you change the customer's perspective that you're kind of out to screw them, basically?
Do exactly this, right? More than they ask before they ask. If you bring somebody more than they even asked from you, they don't think you're out to make things you're not even getting paid for, right? If I send you something and says, here's a trend in a business you should think about, they might the first time go, where's the bill? But when there's no bill, right, just demonstrate to them that you are trying to help them, namely the individual and their business, be successful, right? And oh, by the way, they pay you per products and services, right? That enables them to do that. So I think the more that you follow this kind of rule, the more a customer, and certainly to the extent that you do it consistently, which I'm going to talk about how to do that in a minute, customers know that you do that a little bit, you do that for a month or two, you start to occupy a different place in your head. Because remember, think about the way we all perceive service, right? Like most people perceive service as reactive. Right? I'll give you an answer once you have a problem, right? But so the vendors and the folks that do it before and do it proactively, actually really stand out, right? So that's how you overcome all kinds of perceptions of mismatching, not just perceptions of, you know, somebody trying to screw each other money-wise. Okay. So how do you do this? Like, how do you do more than you ask before they ask when you're an entrepreneur and you've got a million things going on? Well, first I would say is when you set your priorities, your customer happiness has to be right up there, right? It's got to be at the top. So this is not like, hey, this is not a priority of mine. This absolutely has to be a priority. So how do you do it? Again, the ability to operationalize important initiatives, right, when you have lots to do, is always a function of creating process to do that, right? So here's what I would say. Imagine that you have a weekly check-in, might even be with yourself, where with your top clients, you say, red, yellow, green. Are they red? They're in trouble. Yellow, they're okay. Green, they're doing great, right? And that can be nothing more than an Excel spreadsheet with your 10 clients on it, where literally once a week you say to yourself, okay, this is my meeting to set aside where I am with these clients, okay? Now, all that does is tell you where you are, but then you say, okay, how do I avoid this getting to be difficult clients, right? Like what I'm trying to do, as you can probably tell, is I'm trying to advise everybody to get out in front of this. Once you don't do this, that's why people become difficult clients, right? So the way you do this is you put in process. So how do you do more than you ask before they ask? Well, what I would say is this: put in a regular check-in with your client. And depending on the nature of the business that you're in, it could be weekly check-in, it could be a bi-weekly check-in. I think a monthly check-in is not frequent enough, okay, but might be appropriate for a certain type of business. And this is, you know, what you might be saying to yourself, but wait a minute, like there's nothing to check in about. Why am I doing it? This is the more than they ask before they ask. If you have a regular check-in, let's say it's every 2 weeks, and in that regular check-in, that gives you the ability that within that process to do more than to ask before they ask. This isn't you scouring Google trying to find stuff all the time. It's going, hey, listen, in 3 days, I've got this check-in, right? I'm going to make sure that I bring them more than they asked me for. Okay. Secondly, within this process is creating a regular, consistent system of what you're going to deliver to them, right? So if that's a report, if that's information, it's data, it's the same way every time. Hey, we're going to have our weekly check-in. Here's the agenda. We're going to go through A, B, C. That going to them, being consistent, having it be the same process every time actually helps them, right? Giving them an agenda, right, for what that check-in is going to be like helps them, right? Helps the customer go, okay, great. Now, some of us had customers that are consumers. You can use the same types of concepts. Let's say, for example, you're a personal stylist, right? Now, you can wait for them to call you, right? Or you could say, hey, listen, once a month, I'd like to check in with you and just kind of give you an update on the latest styles and things that I might think might be great for you. Okay. And a lot of times, once you are within that regular process, you could be super creative because it's not all over the place. It's not like, oh man, I got to scramble around and figure out what to do for client ABC. It's that, okay, on Tuesday, I have this regular meeting. I have a regular agenda that I've set. Maybe I give them a standard PowerPoint, right? Walk them through a couple of slides that give them an indication with consistency, right? And sometimes when you're bringing them things, you're not even bringing them things to sell them anything. You're just bringing them things to inform them. Okay, so your own internal process around red, yellow, green to check in with clients, right? To see how they're doing, but then setting up regular process with clients where you're being organized, structured, right? Consistent, right? That's what makes clients feel like you're setting a foundation for them for success, right? The other thing it does is it gets out in front of problems, right? Because we've all known where you wait a month and you don't have a check-in and then all of a sudden something happens. The client's saying to themselves, well, what were they doing over the last month? When you're checking in week to week to week, or every 2 weeks, you get out in front of customers becoming difficult customers. Okay, so I'm going to spend some time what happens if we don't get out in front of it and clients, become difficult. I'm going to spend some time on that as well, because inevitably it happens. But what I can suggest to you is that 9 out of 10 times, if you ultimately get off on the right foot, set the standard process, tell them that's a standard way, the way you work to make life efficient for them, right? They get into a flow where there's no surprises. People clearly and calmly communicate challenges that they're having, right? And you're only waiting short period of times between these things to make sure things are staying on track or not staying on track. Okay, so let me stop there for a second. V, any questions coming in from your end?
Nope.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead, Gia.
Okay. Actually, I got a couple things.
It's not a tax question, is it?
No. This is my break. I got get my coffee. I'm just like, okay, I need a break because my brain is okay. So, couple things. One is, I hear what you're saying. Sounds so amazing. Okay, so before I make the other comment, I want you to answer the question, what you just said. So if you're not able to do a weekly check-in or bi-weekly check-in, and you can't like anticipate a problem or maybe even solve a problem before the problem even occurs, do you think that you are that you're too top heavy with clients, that you shouldn't accept any more clients, or what's the feedback on that if you're not able to do that?
You know what, I don't think it's ever that you're not able to do it. We just don't think of it, right? A lot of us are like, okay, well, if it's not fixed, it ain't fixed. It's not broken, don't fix it, right? And that's just our mentality. I don't think it's bad. It's just that, okay, we have clients, we do stuff for them, and there's no reason for me to hear from them. There's no reason for us to check in, right? And I just think it's a mentality more than anything. I think if you put in these little check-ins, sometimes these check-ins could last 5 minutes, right? You could have nothing. But when you go to a client and say, hey, I'm so happy to have you a client. We have a regular process by which we make sure that everything's staying on track. We do it, we check in every 2 weeks and here and here and here and here. And a lot of times we have a standard agenda. It actually makes you really much more efficient by doing it that way than doing it reactively. If you have lots of clients where you're like, okay, I've got the revenue to do it, then obviously you can, maybe you add staff, but I just think a lot of times it's just not the normal process, right, for people doing it. I think it's just a mentality and something that for a company that's growing, this operational process is not natural, and it's the stuff that fuels growth.
Okay, and I think I probably already know the answer, because that is a desire, definitely, and a thought process that I want to do, but just having the time to do it is not there, no matter how I look at it and what how I try to fix it or rearrange or block time, and 5 steps of time management, all that stuff is just, I just haven't had the time. I desire to, because I want to provide that excellent customer service, but it's just more of a challenge.
But here's what I would say to you. Do you spend more than a half hour a week, right, putting out fires for that client? If the answer is yes, right, which for many people it is, right? I'm not even talking about putting out fires. It might be emails back and forth, right? Then why not just throw it in an organized 30-minute meeting where you do everything in that meeting? Right, you're actually saving time. I'm not saying you ignore your clients, but if the MO is that, listen, every week we're going to go in this 30 minutes and do our thing, right? That's going to care for 90, unless there's a real emergency, and really heads off, a lot of surprises.
That's good. I'll take heed to that. Because I have so much backlog, sometimes I'm like, oh, okay, good. They haven't requested anything. They haven't asked for anything. So I can work on the request that I do have, so that when their turn comes, I can have those other things available. But I definitely hear what you're saying.
And you got to do it. You have to systematize it, right? So you do it when you land a new client, you say, this is the way we work, right?
Mm-hmm.
We're going to have a check-in meeting every X, right? Every week, every 2 weeks. And here's the standard agenda. We're going to go through everything. And this is where we're going to go through it. So when they email you 57 times during the week, right? You train them to get into that process where that cares for a good amount of things.
That's good. That's good. Now, can I ask you my real question?
Sure.
Because that was just a comment on what my real question, and then you can, if you answer it later, that's fine. But one is, me being an accountant and a tax preparer and payroll, I push paper all day long. Sometimes it's hard to get my clients to value paper because it's not a tangible product. So yeah, them valuing paper is challenging. So just want to get insight on that. And then when that happens, they just like a client we had just Wednesday, the fee was discussed and maybe she didn't recall. Then when she came to pick up her tax return, the fee was $20 more than what she anticipated. She paid $5 more to another company just the previous year, but it was $20 more. She was so upset, and she just left. So one, and of course, we have to give her originals back. That's the law. Right. And we've lost time, and now we lost, the money too, because she didn't value what we've done. So in that case, when you have an irate client like that, do you just accept anything they give because you realize that it's potentially they can just walk out and you'll get zero for your time? Or how do you, how do you manage that? Because sometimes the expectations of clients for what they're paying is so unreasonable. Yep. You can never really please them. But in this particular case, we had went over everything. They knew what their refund amounts was, what they were going to owe. And it just came time for the payment. It was like, that $20 thing, well, actually was for one of my business partner clients. So I said, well, let me check, because right here, she said is this amount. And she was just livid, and left. And then we lost the whole entire amount. So. Okay.
Yeah. Well, here's what I would say. Again, it goes down to proactivity. When you are regularly talking to people about how you're interacting to service them, those things aren't surprises, right? So instead of it being, 8 weeks in when you've done all the work, in week 2, you're like, you realize there's this one issue, it's going to be an extra $20. What do you think? Right. So by the time you get there, and I'll answer your question when you get there, but a lot of it, you got to head it off ahead of time. Right. And so if you were talking about that, hey, last year it was $1,000. This year it's going to be $1,020 because of A and B and C, right? Usually you're when you have that regular, consistent communication, or you learn something in week 3 that you found out that it's going to cost a little bit more. So it goes back again to just getting out in front of it and communicating in a consistent way, which is what a lot of this process help you do. The other thing is, I'll never forget when we were negotiating with a big health plan, and people would get these rewards. And a lot of times rewards went from being things you physically ship them, like the old gift certificates and gift cards, to something you could get electronically. So you could just get something to your email that said, I get a $25 Amazon, code. And so the person from the health plan said to me, we got paid a transaction fee every time an incentive was issued. They're like, I understand why when you ship a gift card, you get a transaction fee, but why do you get a transaction fee when you send out an automated email? You're not doing any work. And I was like, when you go up to the ATM and you take out $100, do you think there's like a monkey inside that is like doling out? Like you pay a transaction fee, like there's value, right? So, but the point of it is that the way you communicate value, and in certain areas like yours, the way you communicate risk, right? Meaning, listen, you want to take your tax return and do it a different way. Just remember there's 1, 2, 3, right? Clients should, and I stress should, walk away understanding the value of things. But think about when we are on the other side of the transaction. Life is cluttered. We got a lot going on. We're not paying attention to everything. We certainly don't remember what happened a week ago, right? What we do remember is, right, I'm going to put my hand on the stove, right? We remember things like risk. So when clients say to you, I should pay less, I should not do this, like this is not what you cost me, you should just be able to remind them of value. Remember, we all do all this and we get all this work and right, whatever. Sometimes you have to remind them of risk, because risk makes them go, okay, I could do this myself, but then I'm gonna end up in jail because I didn't file my taxes the right way. Okay. The other thing, and remember, it shouldn't be this way. You should just be able to say, I did these 27 things for you. I did the trial balance and the thing, right? Like, but people don't, right? They should get value. They should get effort. But remember, somebody else is out there. You guys have all heard me say this before. Somebody else is out there offering every one of our products and services for free, right? You're so always competing against free. So part of it is the value you're communicating, but part of it is the risk they're going to experience if they don't do this. And you'd have to do that subtly, right? But you have to make them understand that, because otherwise they go other places. The other part of it is I've talked about this before, is know-how, is demonstrating to them in these regular processes is ways they can do that. Remember, these are the things you have to be thinking about. These are the things that mistakes you can make. These are things that are going to impact you as a person or in a business. And when they understand that you bring that know-how to the table, they're less likely to worry about how much paper is being pushed. Okay. Not magic answers,
Thank you
of course.
so much. I appreciate it.
Remember, the hard part about, the hard part about all these answers is we're the ones that stay up all night and burn our savings and hurt our friendships and drink too much alcohol. And what I'm saying to you is, oh, by the way, if this stuff happens, it's all our fault, right? So you have to take that perspective that you have to build process and structure to be able to communicate more than they ask before they ask, the know-how, the risk, right? To make sure that they understand that why they should be paying what they're paying.
Yep. David, is that a high five or you got a question?
That's a question.
Okay, go for it.
So I have built in this process of check-ins with the client in my business process, but I'll take you a level deeper, because some clients are so disorganized that even though they agree to it, it doesn't happen regularly.
Yep.
Any advice for, any advice, I'll just leave it at that for how I can drive that kind of consistency, even when the client knows they need it, but they're not accountable enough to pull it off.
See, David, we at Lonely Entrepreneur only have clients that come to every meeting on time, organized, right? Like you just described 90% of the clients out there.
Right.
Clients will literally say to you, why do we need a check-in meeting? Right? And anybody that's run a larger organization understands that these processes are what makes the world go round, right? You can't just randomly be like, I'll meet you at the coffee and we'll figure out, right, how to build an airplane, right? It just doesn't work that way. So what I would say is that even if the client doesn't show, send them a regular report, send them a one-pager that says, here's the stuff that's going on, right? And make that regular, make that consistent, almost make it like your agenda. So even if they're not there, you can at least point to the fact that you've tried to give them the information that is out there. But it's a challenge. I can tell you that you have to do it from when you start a client relationship. You have to tell them this is the normal way it works. I mean, David, there are companies out there, I don't know what percentage of, many, many companies that are decent sized companies that literally don't even have regular management meetings. They have 400 employees and they don't have a regular management meeting amongst their management. And when you go and you talk to them and you say, we need a management meeting, you know what they say? They say, we already have too many meetings.
Those are my clients.
Right. And that's everybody. But the answer is, how could you run a decent sized organization without a regular meeting of your most senior people? You say to them, I know that you're going to bitch and moan for this, but once we do this for 3 or 4 weeks in a row, you are going to say to yourself, how did we ever run the business without doing this, right? If they don't show and they don't want to show, I would just send them regular reporting anyway. Okay.
Thank you.
Remember, clients don't pay attention. They don't have time to pay attention. They have to be retrained all the time. And the more that you do that, right, the happier they will be. And a lot of times, like I remember one of our team members said, well, we already sent the client all that information. Why do we have to reiterate it? Like, think of ourselves. Do we read everything? Do we remember everything? If somebody said to you, hey, you remember that thing 3 weeks ago, you'd stop them right there and say, the answer is no. I don't even know what you're about to say, but the answer is no. So regular, consistent processing, consistency of message, consistency of tools, these are the things that ultimately drive client happiness.
Great. Thank you. Great points. Okay. Afia, you're next.
Hi. So I have a question for Michael. You mentioned that you were talking about how you have to deliver before they ask and after they ask.
Yeah.
So would that also relate to potential clients?
Absolutely. I mean, let's think of it this way. If 10 people are trying to sell healthcare IT services, as an example, right? And they all come to the table and say, we're the best at security and we're all, we're high trust certified and dot. Everybody's saying the same thing. One of the 10 will bring them more, and maybe bring them more about healthcare IT, more than they asked. Hey, you asked me all about this stuff. You didn't ask me about this. So they're saying to themselves, okay, I brought them more than they asked. And one more 10 will bring it even more. Is not only will they bring them more than they ask about healthcare IT, but they'll bring them more than they ask about their industry or what their CEO cares about or how healthcare IT relates to some other thing that they read online about what their business is trying to do. Mm-hmm. Right? So the more than they ask before they ask is a way to differentiate when you're in the sales process. Okay. We're always thinking that, okay, I'm going to tell them we're good. Okay. By the way, that's what every vendor says. No vendor writes an email that says we're not that great on Thursday. Right. They're like, we're awesome. That doesn't make anybody do anything. It certainly doesn't make us do things. What does make people do things is if you said, this is what we do. And oh, by the way, think about this stuff, right? Think about these things, right? Whether you hire us or not, think about these things because these are the issues that we see. Because then you go, okay, this person is thinking about my business and they're bringing know-how. Now they're different than 6 or 7 of the others, right? And then if you said, well, here's also some things in your business that people make mistakes at or face risk in, right? Not even related to, for example, healthcare IT, right? The more than they ask before they ask is something that when anybody is being sold to, those are the folks that they call you up and say, help me figure this out together. Like you're the type of person I work with. Tell me what the budget should be. Tell me how we should think about doing this. Now, you might not always win the business, but always try to be providing things that aren't just sprinkles on the ice cream cone. They aren't just the things that other healthcare IT, in this case, vendors would offer to them.
Okay. Well, I have started to do vlogs and blogs on the healthcare IT aspect and given people tips and tools. Mm-hmm. Aside from that, at least I would assume that you would say that I should also do more email interaction and check in with them and give them more tips via email.
Yeah, listen, I don't think that the vehicle really matters, right? Whether it's blogs or it's email. Think of it this way, 100 things come across my desk, and I might look at one if it really catches my eye. So I'm not sitting around reading blogs all day long, right? It's just so yes, that is a way you do something, but the key is however you're reaching them, you're giving them, kind of insight that makes them understand who you are. I mean, I know back in the old healthcare days, we wrote a white paper that said the 7 deadly sins of running incentive programs in healthcare. And we were like, it didn't mention our name once. It just said, don't do these 7 things, right? But by doing that, we were showing that many of the people reading this would have gone, I didn't know those things. Mm-hmm. And when I look at the other vendors who said, we have, this technology or this process or whatever the widget was, like we were bringing more than they asked before they asked, and they were going, okay, there's know-how there that I can take advantage of. Okay. It is incumbent on us when we talk to customers to make sure those customers understand what the know-how is that we're bringing to the table, right? And doing it more than they ask and before they ask for it. That's a recipe for them going, that's somebody I want to work with. And when you get to that point, right, price doesn't matter as much. If you don't get to that point, you're like, okay, there's 100 healthcare ID vendors. I could get this from anywhere.
All right. Another question.
Sure.
So I'm interested in creating value for consultants, employees, and or at least acknowledging them. And I know that I've read from your story and what you mentioned about gift cards. Mm-hmm. Do you think it's a good idea to reward employees or contractors gift cards?
Are these people that work for you?
Yes. So our industry is independent contracting and yep. Is typically 1099. But I feel that another reason why I decided to open this company is that I feel that employees or contractors were not rewarded for their efforts and for hard work, and sometimes they will not give their all, and so that translates to your clients. If your employees are not happy, they're not going to treat your clients well.
Yep. So here's what I'd say. Things like gift cards. Remember, we were giving gift cards to people for healthy behavior, and that was one concept. I think gift cards, anything that's money based is kind of the same as money.
Okay.
Right, to them. Now, there's a chapter in the book, and in fact, I think it's in the learning community as well, where we say, help people with their bucket list, and performance will matter. Right, and what we did at our old company was we basically went around to all of our employees, probably 400 employees at the time. And we said, what do you want? And they said, what do you mean? What do you want? We're like, what do you want? And they would say something related to the business, like, oh, we want to learn the product better. And I was like, no, not what do you want in the business? What do you want personally? And one of them was a customer service rep that wanted to become an opera singer, and right, somebody else who's wanted her mom to quit smoking. And we as a company helped them with those things. And when we helped them with those things, we called them bucket lists. They weren't really bucket lists, but these were things that they really wanted in their lives that didn't really have anything to do with the company. When we rewarded them that way, their performance and their loyalty was, they're like, I want to learn the product. I want to learn more. I'll cover for somebody else, because you're actually helping with them with their lives, not just their lives relative to what they did for the company. The money part's the money part, right? And gift cards falls into that, but be creative about other things you can do for them. I know when it's independent contractors, it's hard because they may not be with you all the time like a regular employee is, but try to be more creative about the stuff that matters to them. As long as you're, obviously competing on money the same way.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. The other questions, or we keep going? Because I want to get to this difficult customer thing.
Keep going.
Okay. So you can probably tell that we really believe that so much of this is getting out in front of this, right? From the minute you sign a client to the process you put in place to using that process to bring knowledge, and more than they ask and before they ask, right? But you do get to those circumstances where you get to difficult customers that you've really done a lot of things, gone above and beyond. I mean, I don't know of too many circumstances where you put in place all this stuff where you end up in this place, because it's just, when you're going week to week and you're checking in all the time, it's really hard for a customer to ignore things week after week after week after week. So that being said, when customers come to the table and are really pushing you and really being difficult, this is where you have to introduce risk to them. You have to introduce to them the risk of leaving you, right? Or the risk of not paying you the right amount just outweighs, right, the reward of them doing that, right? And this is a last resort. Like, you don't want to do that. So I'll give you an example. Back in the day when we used to sign health plans, they negotiate really hard with vendors. And for any of you that have won big corporate contracts, especially when you're a younger company, you feel like the company that you're talking to, when they send you the 100-page agreement, you feel like you don't have any negotiating leverage, right? Because, oh, you went back and you said to your team, hey, we won this big account, right? And it might have been your first, your fifth, and even if it's your 30th, right? You always feel like you're negotiating from a position of weakness. And you try to say to yourself, how do you create leverage? How do you create some risk for them? You know, in the beginning, you would just be like, they could just pick somebody else, right? What we realized was that with health plans, they used to launch these programs every fall. So for those of you, when you do your benefits, like every fall, October, November, you're asked to pick your health plan and do also. And so all the programs they would put in place, they would figure out what they were, you know, over the summer, and they would launch them so they were ready for like September. Well, what we realized is that by waiting longer into the year to finalize our contract, created more risk for them. So the closer and closer and closer we got to the launch, the more leverage we had and the less leverage they had, right? So it's a little bit about difficult customers, but it's also just about what difficult customers represent is an imbalance, right? They have the money, right? They're the ones that are going to fight. You have to create some kind of risk for them. And so that is like when somebody is being persnickety and they're like, I don't really like you. You have to make them understand, right? These are going to be the implications. So you might say things like, whether you work with us or you work with someone else, right? These are you're going to deal with these 5 things. The 5 things you're dealing with now that you believe that we haven't done an adequate job with, you're going to deal with these 5 things. Okay. And customers go back just like would we and go, okay, I should just look at it as, do I get value? Are the people I'm working with, you know, thinking about my business, trying to help me, all the stuff we said before, but sometimes they're just not reasonable, right? Or they're not paying attention. And that's where introducing appropriately the risk that they're going to face if they do this, right? You know, we're happy to send you to somebody else that make cookies, but you know, the president of your company really likes our cookies. And it's said a little bit more eloquently than that, right? But you're beyond the reasonable part at this point. It isn't just, hey, remember we talked about this, David, to your point, hey, we talked about this 3 weeks ago, and selective amnesia comes up and they're like, we never talked about that. What do you mean? There is an element when you get down to the last resort of making them understand that the risk of doing what they're about to do, leave, not pay you, right, be unhappy, is greater than just going, okay, I'm not happy about this, but let's go ahead and do this. I'll never forget one of these really close relationships we have. This was a new client, and we'd put a proposal in, and it was for, you know, $1 million, $2 million, it was nothing. And the woman on the other end, who's a very senior executive at a big health plan, said, it just seems to me that this is way too much money for this. And I said to her, it was like a 20-page proposal. And I said, all due respect, I didn't even read the 20-page proposal we gave you. I know you didn't read the 20-page proposal that we gave you. So whether it is or isn't too much money, it might be too little, it might be too much. We may not be charging you enough. Okay. But let's skip like, we're the big company, let's get over this is too much money. Tell me what you're trying to accomplish. I'm telling you, based on what we know, this is what we can deliver. If you don't want all that, we'll take stuff out. If you want to pay $2 million, you want to pay $1 million, we'll give you smaller tires, right? But you always have to create a risk. Now, remember, This is a woman who wasn't looking at this. She had her teams looking at this. She was put there to negotiate. When she gets off the phone, if she wants this, if she has to then go back to her teams and her teams are like, we need this, right? That's risk for her. So I was like, don't just tell me what you're thinking. Say to me, I've got $1 million budget and I'll come back and tell you. So you have to create risk for them in the context of the value you provide. Right. And the value is that know-how, right? The stuff been talking about a lot, which is making sure you see that know-how come through. The perspective is, remember, somebody else is offering your service for free. So you're never going to win on price. You're going to win on bringing this unique know-how and insight that makes them go, I got to have this person. Once you're there, you can have conversations like I had. Right. So this is somebody that you risk losing, but you have to show them the risk of taking certain actions, whether it be before they're a customer or when they're already a customer, right? But again, hopefully you get out in front of that by being proactive and having process like we talked about earlier. Okay, I know most of what I talked about over the course of this hour is a non-answer answer, right? It's like, what do we do with persnickety customers? And what I'm telling you is 90% of it is what you do that makes them persnickety, right? It's all the stuff you do kind of leading up to that. Once there's a problem, right? Like once there's a fire, yeah, you got to put out the fire. But 9 times out of 10, you're like, well, why was there a fire? Well, we didn't check the smoke alarm and we didn't change the batteries, and right? So that's the perspective you need to have, especially in a growing organization, right? But I would suggest even when it's just you, right? Implementing this process and using this process to bring your know-how and do more than they ask before they ask will set you up for a lot more success than trying to put out fires.
So the old saying, the customer is always right, is kind of right.
Well, I don't think it's so much that it's the customer's always right. It's that if a customer does not understand, or if a customer does not understand the value, it's because we didn't do enough.
Right.
No, anybody who tells you the customer is always right is one thing wrong. The customer is not always right. It's not about being right. There's a lot of times that customers say to you, right, it's 3 o'clock in New York and it's 4 o'clock in New York. I mean, it's just not the reality. But if a customer doesn't understand, or if a customer doesn't feel like they get value, think of it this way. If you were the CEO of a company and you reported to a board of directors and you walked into that board of directors and the board of directors says, tell me about our customers. And they're like, well, these ones are doing okay. And these ones we're working on. And these ones, they just don't understand. And so we're going to lose 30% of our revenue.
Fired.
Right. Not even fired, the floor would open up. They would just disappear. Right. So it doesn't matter why they're not happy.
Right.
Right. And that's why it's not that they're always right, It's just that you have to get out in front of it and make sure that you're doing probably more than you are when it comes to customers being, getting value out of what you're doing.
Right. Welcome to the world of entrepreneurship. So not only do you have to be the CEO, the marketing, the finance, and right.
Yep. But what's more important than customers, right?
Right. Exactly.
I wanted to remind everybody, first of all, thank you for the thoughtful dialogue and for taking time with you today. I want to remind everybody, please, if you haven't done yet, if you have the opportunity, there's a survey link in the chat where we're taking surveys, where we're just trying to find out how can we continually to help you. It takes, what does it take? The 5 or 6 minutes, I think.
Yeah, it's not long. Super helpful for us though.
Please, if you haven't already, and if you know colleagues that are in the program, please feel free to do so. Okay.
I think we're right up against the hour. As always, appreciate everybody's time, and obviously, hopefully you found this beneficial. Look forward to seeing everybody back here next Friday, 12 p.m. Eastern. And keep the questions coming. These are great discussions.
Thank you.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great
weekend.
weekend.
Thank you.
Bye. Yeah.